Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming now to a very serious part of our series on freedom in the light of 3 decades later, because we are talking with Mr. Shyla. He was a former young front activist from Belarus, and he had to leave his country after the last protest 2 years ago because he doesn't feel safe, and he was arrested and imprisoned before, like his father. And Shyla is now talking with us from Berlin. Dear Ivan, warm greetings from Tallinn in Estonia.
Hi.
Basically, hello.
Hello.
Basically, when you were born 31 years ago, um, we had great historical events. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the Baltic chain, the end of communism. Uh, how would you see that, your birth date in this context?
Well, let me say we also have had a great events in Belarus because Belarus became an independent state, and independent is a true value for us. Not to be in in USSR is a great value. But let me say that for us and for our friends from Estonia or Poland, this is a different perspective. Because for my friends in these countries, this is an opportunity for better life, sometimes underrated opportunity, because many people of my age don't think that it is. I mean, they sometimes take it for granted. It was during their lifetime, and they did not struggle for it. And but in short terms, in short words, if we evaluate these events, we can say there are two types of economies: developing and developed. It's not fair sometimes to measure the world in such terms, because we also can talk about normal, regular people and lives, and this means much. But nevertheless, if we say about develop and developing economies, there is only one example when developing economy becomes developed in terms of huge economies. It's South Korea. And now in 7 or 8 years, we will see the rare and unique change. Poland, Estonia, Czech Republic, they will become developed economies. And means much for regular, normal people, for everyone, because this is opportunity for normal education, one European home, free travel, safety, life and life quality, expectations of expectancy. So this is huge, and this is huge change for the millions of people. All these events.
Mm. You were just talking about economy.
Yeah.
If you're going a bit broader, the basic human rights, which you saw on yourself, the violation of the basic human rights. Unfortunately, from your Belarusian perspective, you're on the bad side of the history. Would you think that there would have been another alternative, a better alternative in the last 3 decades for Belarus? Or why, basically, in your perspective, for example, the Baltic states were the lucky ones, being part of the EU and being part of the NATO, but basically for Belarus, the history took another way. So how would you say that from your life now, from the from your 30 years, yeah, 31 years?
Uh, first time we were on the same page. I mean, Soviet Union destroyed, and many countries got their independence. But in Belarus, we did not manage to create institutions. This is important. So we saw it in many countries. The first wave of democratic leaders, they were representing such known popular fronts or solidarity movements in Poland. but on the second elections, on the second three elections, they probably lost them because there were another politicians playing on nostalgia, because changes sometimes bring bad times in terms of economy. So in many countries, it was like second generation politicians. In Czech Republic, they were representing former communist elites. But nevertheless, this does not mean that they changed the whole course, the whole destinations. Because in Poland, it was also Kwasniewski who was representing former elites, former communist elites, but this does not, he did not change the course in joining NATO. The problem is that we don't have first free elections after communism was destroyed, and the first elections we did have, it was the first and the last free election, but it was in 1994. People were tired because of economic problems. We did not make institutions such as independent court, free media, and independent parliament. That's why Lukashenko, the paradox is that he won the first and the last three elections, and it was a real choice of the people because he represented the values of integration with Russia, of renovating Soviet Union, of taking back Soviet symbols, and that was the true desire of the people in Belarus at that time. And the problem was that we had weak institutions, and Lukashenko, as a classic dictator, attacked first constitutional court, parliament, and then destroyed free media. The whole things which are done by uh, Orban in Hungary now. So the same way, or in Poland. The first thing you need to attack is constitutional court. And this is important that you have institutions. It's not about leaders, how bright they are, or how strong they are, or weak, doesn't matter. The society should make institutions because institutions is for the decades, for the future, that will exist even you have another president. You should have another president. And that was our problem. And the second one is that in many countries, people were struggling for the freedom, especially in Baltic states. It was not like, wow, one day we have another state, someone signed some papers, and you have another political reality. In Belarus, people moreover were satisfied with Soviet Union. I don't know why, but we do have a referendum on, it was facultative, not obligate referendum, and people were saying, do they want Soviet Union to exist? And most of the people said, yes, why not? It is good for us. So we do not have huge demonstrations. We do not have huge protests or some kind of like Baltic Way or some things like in Poland during the Solidarity movement. So we were taking our independence for granted. Because in different countries we have some political movements, we take it as because something was changed in Moscow. That is why many people did not see a value in independence. So it's like, yeah, okay.
For me, it's a bit difficult to ask you about the past because from the European perspective, and especially the Western European perspective or the German perspective,
Mm-hmm.
your country in which you're living at the moment, we are talking about Vergangenheitsbewältigung. It means dealing with the past, dealing with the totalitarian regimes of the past, the National Socialism, but also the communism, especially also the Stalinism. Now,
Yeah,
actually, from your perspective, from your Belarusian perspective, the past is still present.
yeah, exactly.
You haven't overcome the past, so you just also described that basically you're living or the people in Belarus are living in a dictatorship. So what do you think, how we should basically um, remember the victims of the totalitarian regimes, especially also of the communist regimes, in your perspective, that we can find a common narrative? How would you say? What can we do for our memory culture, which is, in your
Uh,
perspective, still
we have,
present? Yeah?
yeah, we have to say that we have different views on this problem in different parts of the Europe,
Mm.
because everyone knows that Adolf Hitler is a problem, is a bad man, but not everyone thinks about Stalin. It's not like it's everywhere in the culture or in the societies, because not every country faced what we call totalitarian regime in Russia, in Soviet Union.
Mm.
So, and it's also about threats, because today not everyone sees a threat in Russia, or because Russia is going on like Soviet Union way of dealing with things, and I don't know how to change it, and I don't know how to pursue people. Nowadays, we see what happened if you don't much think about the past,
Mm.
because many of the problems we see now in Europe, it is the problems of not recognition Soviet Union as an evil regime, and not understanding where we have the border of the Europe, because not many people in Europe now even think that it is a war in Europe, because if you're in Spain or in France or in Germany,
Mm.
sometimes you don't see that Belarus or Ukraine is a part of your community of Europe. And I don't know. This is a difficult, tough question. How we should make people to understand that Soviet Union was the same evil regime as Nazi German.
Mm.
Uh, Time and today's experience, unfortunately, make more people think that this is a problem, and we should think about the past to prevent some events, tragical events in future.
Mm. Can the European Union help in this context? I mean, basically, the European integration process started as an economic project, frankly
Yeah.
speaking, but it actually, uh, the second pillar is also to be a peace project and a project for the liberal democracies, promoting the liberal democracies within the current EU states, but also in the neighborhoods. What do you think, also in the light of the efforts basically to support the opposition in Belarus? What can be done? What can Europe, especially the European Union, do more to support freedom?
European Union can't change the situation. It's not like European Union is not Moscow to provide troops to Belarus and to change the political regime if they don't like it. So these people in Belarus, first of all, have to do something if they want democracy. This is not. It's a questionable still. Do we want democracy, or do we want to live in an authoritarian or totalitarian state? Europe should, first of all, flag itself as a one European home you can enter, because we don't still have an answer. Do we have European future, or it will be as much difficult as it is in Ukraine? If you have a war in Ukraine, you still don't know, you don't have an answer when Ukraine will join European Union. This is the problem. Europe should say, like, we are open for other countries and for the people. We are open society, society with values, where you can safely live, work, create, uh, and people in Georgia or in Armenia or in Moldova or in Ukraine or in Belarus, they should know the answer. Are we capable of being part of European Union? Because European Union now, the leaders of European Union and the people who live in European Union, they don't know. Should be more countries in European Union or not? should we open the door for Ukraine or not now or in 10 years or in 15 years? People in Ukraine are willing to be a part of European Union. They are struggling for it. They have a war, but still there is no answer. The status of Ukraine is now like you can wait for 15 years or for 5 years or for 12 years, and this is not good for the people who live in these countries. I mean, we don't have it's not like alternative. On one side, you have an alternative from Russia. Come with us now. We give you money. We will support your political elites. You will do the same as you do now. And the political elites in Belarus don't have an answer. What will they get from being your EU member or candidate of your state? So we need clear alternative that we are not alone with Russia. So we have European Union near us, and it's not like we give you some programs or grants or study visits. It's about huge political transformation and capability of countries to join you. So the first thing is for EU is to answer the question: do we need more member states in the European Union? Because as you remember, for instance, 5 years ago, it was a referendum in Netherlands, and the question was about Ukraine, but it was not obligatory referendum. It was even about membership of Ukraine. It was about association, and most of the people vote no. This is not an example of solidarity and cooperation. This is an example of, I mean, and I do understand people. You have your own good project, you live in prosperity and in safety, and you want to create a fence near your lands and say goodbye to other countries. This is not. I mean, this is also the choice of the people, but you also have an alternative choice, and it's also about economy. It's not like Ukraine is a big country, Belarus is a big country, more people, more money, more prosperity. It's also about values. It's also about European values. You don't know. Okay, that's all.
Very important what you said. EU is more than Erasmus, and also that
Yeah,
you you touched the tackle of the values, which also is more than just institutional engineering, and also that you reminded about this Dutch referendum on Ukraine. This is also almost forgotten, and now basically Europe is facing a new geopolitics, right, with this war. So basically, now we see some weaknesses of the West, and maybe it affects Europe. Would you see here a chance also to go forward, to see basically the West has to keep itself together, and Russia is really a threat? Do you think there are less Putin understanders now in Europe, or how would you evaluate that situation which has shocked many Europeans? What happened now this year? More shocked than the events in Belarus or before
yeah, that's
2014 in Ukraine, right? How would you evaluate it?
there is a war in Europe, the biggest war since the Second World War, and the first thing you have to understand is a war in Europe, not in like former Soviet states, nowhere. This is a war in Europe, on European borders, and this is a threat for everyone. I mean, I'm not talking like you have to wait for a war in Poland or Lithuania or in Estonia, uh, but there is a huge threat that something should be done with it, and Putin is a threat. And this is the first important thing. You should evaluate the situation as a huge, the biggest problem, a tragic situation. And the war changed a lot, but more things are coming ahead. So the biggest tests are in future, because now we see that it is not a fast war. It's not a war which ended by this year. We don't know, And the difference in politics between Russia and the European Union, it's also one thing Putin wanted to play against, because people in Russia do not change Putin. People in Europe can vote for other politicians. People in Europe are voting and supporting Orban in Hungary, for example. I mean, they do have free of choice, but they still support Orban. Or people in Serbia support more or less pro-Russian regime. So, and we here in Europe, because I'm living in Europe, we now see what is going on with economy, with inflation and other things, and it will be a test for the people about the refrigerator versus values. It is a tricky thing, because in every authoritarian state you have this choice every day. Like, what do you support? Your way of life, but in dictatorship, or you want to struggle, or you can be in worse situation, but you fight for values. But you see that 30 years ago, frankly speaking, it was many people think that this is the end of this history. Like, yes, like democracy won, and now we don't think about, I mean, everything will be okay because democracy won. This is the end of history. Now we have fair vote, and without bad actors, and we don't need to think about values now, because we all do have them, and this is nice. But it's not like this, unfortunately. And not even in Ukraine you should think about values, but also in Europe, because you need to protect them. And this war is important, also important not only for Europe but for the rest of the world, to see what model is more effective, like totalitarian in Russia or
Mm-hmm.
democratic state in Europe.
True. Um, you're living at the moment in Berlin. Berlin. Um, I come from Western Germany originally, and we hardly could imagine a unified Berlin in the 70s, in the 80s. This was a faraway scenario, actually. It was rarely said out that this could be an option, the unified Germany. We have reached that 3 decades ago. Would you imagine for your own children in the future that Belarus can be freed from the regime, can be a free state where you can live again? Or can you imagine this scenario like we have faced in the 70s and 80s, that this scenario which was so far away from any realism?
Mm-hmm. Hard to say, hard to make any. I mean, the war in Ukraine, many things depends on the result of how it will be ended. Because from one side you have a window of opportunities, wind of change can come to Eastern Europe, or it can be wind of death of your hopes, because you see what happened now. Belarus now become an isolated state. You can't normally travel to Belarus. In Belarus, there is difficult to get visa, and this is reminds me of what we call curtain. Okay, how to say? One second, sorry. Железный занавес. Iron curtain. Yeah. So and some people think that this not a window of opportunities. It is exactly opposite moment, because two dictators are isolated together. No one have an opportunity to trade normally with Europe and the rest of the world, and they can become they will support each other in a vast more scale than before. Europe also is there is a real wall on the Belarus border between Poland, the real wall like in Game of Thrones. So there is no air travel, there is no train travel, and there is no normal possibility to get even visa in Belarus. You have to wait 5 or 6 months. So I don't know what it will be, but uh, if Russia win on some kind win this war, it will be a huge problem for the region for 10, 15 years. I don't know. I'm not this kind of person which is thinking about Putin health. Like, oh, he's not in good shape, and in 5 or 10 years it will be ended. I don't know. And you see how people in Russia see on the war, look at the war. They probably support it. Moreover, half of the population in Belarus also supports war in some kind. It's like they don't want our forces to join the war, but normally they think that Russia is doing a good thing. And Vladimir Putin is the most popular politician in Belarus. He is more popular than Lukashenko, obviously, but this is a problem. So I don't know what will be happening in Belarus and how we can change the situation now. Many things depends on what we have in Ukraine. So our hopes, it's not only words. It many things depends. Our future depends on what happens in Ukraine. So Russia should lost the war, or we have big problems in our region.
One last question. We are talking a lot nowadays about the information war and propaganda, like we
Mm-hmm.
discussed also the totalitarian regimes, professional propaganda. Now we have transformed that to the age of so-called social media and the virtual world. What do you think if you would talk now with a normal Belarusian worker on the street, what he thinks about the war? You mentioned a bit already before, but how the Belarusian people are getting their information now about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and also in Europe? Because what I heard is that people in Russia thinking that Europe is in a very bad condition. We are declining. We have many refugees and so on. What you know about the thinking of the people in Belarus?
You know, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, many people were think like I was one of them that if we have internet, like free media in Belarus, if we
Mm.
have an alternative and we show people the real picture, they will vote against Lukashenko. This does not happen. Doesn't happen at all because people sometimes do not need alternative. They want, it's even better sometimes for dictators to have an alternative because people want to make their own choice and to choose the picture they want to see. This is a huge problem. We do have free internet in Belarus. Media do not working in the country, but you can read news in Belarus. Doesn't matter. People just don't want to do it. People just want to do, they want to read Russian propaganda because the picture is more attractive for them. This is a huge problem that in Europe you can't play, not only in Europe, like in democracies, you think about values. So you can't use these post-truth things. You can't use manipulation. But you know that in Twitter, fake news spreading by the people much more faster than the real news because fake news are more attractive. They have bright headlines, bright pictures, and everything is clear because you have bad guys and good guys. You like see Ukraine is a bad guy and blah blah blah. I don't think about it. You live now in Belarus, but you live better than in Europe. Okay, I like this picture. I live in Belarus and I want to think that my life is better than European one. I want to think that in Lithuania or in Latvia, people don't have food. They are hungry, and I'm in good position. Doesn't matter I live in Belarus. Doesn't matter we have dictatorship, but we have food. So this is a huge problem. I don't know if there is a solution. I mean, this is so difficult to struggle about propaganda. One thing I mean, I don't have an answer for this question. I don't have a solution. I know if people travel more, if they see real people in Europe, this is better for them. I mean, even to think about them as humans, because many people in Russia, for instance, they do not leave their country. They don't even imagine what the same normal people live in different countries. They think that they have Russophobia in every state and they will be attacked. Not true, because people in Europe do not attack other people. That's another way of life. I mean, one solution is to leave an opportunity for people in Belarus go to Lithuania and to see how real things looks like in these countries, to talk to a person from Lithuania and to ask him some questions and make friendship and some kind of cooperation. We still need this just because of it is the last real alternative. And the other alternative is to be isolated and to see and to look into Russian propaganda. And as I mentioned, it is very attractive for the people.
Well, thank you very much. We could talk hours more, and we did that. We have a common past, and that's why we are very happy and appreciate very much that we got in touch with the European organizations, the youth organizations, and we hope the best for you personally, for your father, and of course also
Thanks.
for your country. And we hope, of course, that one day you can have your life back in Belarus. And if not, we are hoping the best for you and your life here in Germany, in Berlin. And all the best for you. Thank you very much.